Happy Sunday. Nothing like a hot cup of tea. Good morning, everybody. Happy Sunday. Gosh, that was a bit racy and quick this morning. I'm not feeling very well. I've been away, God, it feels like forever. I've been traveling forever and at events all over the country. And almost always when I'm on a plane after a few days, I, like repeatedly for a few days, I always get sick. I always get some sort of like buggy thing. So I've woken up this morning feeling pretty ropey and everything just feels a little bit slow. So no moustache today, I'm afraid. I just realised, I went, oh God, I haven't really dressed properly. And so anyway, it's lovely to see you all. Hello and welcome. I have got, do you know what I love is that we're building a kind of community here, and that's super lovely because I get people saying hello to each other in the chat and I just think that's so lovely. It is me, it's Jez Rose, it's Sunday Elevenses, and it is live, which means pretty much anything could happen. Cheers. I tell you what, welcome to this houseplant special, by the way. And I realised that I forgot to change the slide from last week, so it did say it was a Halloween special. Influenced by Jim. Hello, Jim. He is here watching, so that's lovely. Thank you very much for the suggestion of the houseplant special. I hope you'll enjoy it. I have just recorded a little video looking at some of the houseplants, and I'm going to talk to you about some of the care of the houseplants. Jim had a few questions that he's popped in. A couple of other of you have popped in some questions as well. But before we get going, I am super excited about Christmas. It's like 2 weeks and a bit till I get to put our Christmas decorations, and I am epically excited. Morning, Carol. Morning, Kath. Hey, Mark. Hey, everybody. So I've got myself some Christmas tea because I realise it's a little too early, probably, to go ahead and put Christmas decorations up. So instead, it's like a orangey, clovey, spicy black tea, and it's flipping gorgeous. So that's what I'm doing today. You'll hear a lot of clonking around because Woody is now 17 weeks old, I think, and so sleeps a lot less than he did when he was a puppy and needs a lot more attention. So he's in his crate with a bottle and a pizzle stick. We'll see how long that goes. Now, before we get to the houseplant special, can I just say a huge thank you if you donated to my GoFundMe, to my Macmillan shaving thing. I'm currently in that, it's growing back quite quickly. I'm currently in that halfway house still where I look a little bit Action Man, a little bit Lego figure. But Macmillan sent me this super lovely little thing in a post, say thanks for braving the shave, with a little certificate that says I raised £1,200, which is a little bit inaccurate because I raised £1,600. So I think this was probably printed before the other 500 quid went in. So it was 1,600 quid. And on the back of here, it tells you what your donation sort of helps. And it says if you raise £1,135, I raised more than that, it's paid for a Macmillan nurse for 1 week, helping people living with cancer and their families to receive essential medical, practical and emotional support when they need it the most. So thanks so much for helping me do that. I've got a little badge, so I'm going to put that on my travel bag and wear that as well. So yeah, that's great. Isn't that a lovely, fuzzy, warm way to start the week? So thanks for being a part of it. Mark says a few people he worked with have Christmas decorations up already. Now, I was influenced by somebody last week who put their Christmas decorations up. It just seems a little too early, November. My mum and dad, when I was little, we had one Christmas that I remember. Apparently they did it more often. Please, Woody, make as much noise as you possibly can. One Christmas, they put the Christmas decorations up on Christmas Eve when I'd gone to bed and told me that, and then I woke up in the morning and the house was completely magically transformed, and they said that the Christmas elves did it while Santa was laying down the presents. Isn't that just the most magical idea? Where they said they only did it once because it was an absolute nightmare. They were up till like 2 in the morning putting Christmas decorations up. But thanks very much, Mum and Dad, for the effort. Now, I said this would be a houseplant special. If you've got any houseplanty type questions, feel free to pop them in the chat and I'll answer them. I don't proclaim to be an expert in houseplants. I've just collected them for a very long time. There's less in this house because we're sort of in between houses at the minute, and at this house that sort of feels like a sort of temporary pit stop, I scaled down a bit. At the farm I had about 300 houseplants. There are, I haven't counted them actually, probably about 150, I would imagine, throughout the house. So it feels like there's a lot less, and it's interesting because I noticeably feel that there are less plants in the house, but everybody that comes in goes, oh my word, it's like a greenhouse. And then of course I go to normal people's houses and they've got, a plant or, 5 plants, and they get all freaked out about what's going to happen when they go on holiday. The most common question I get asked is, how long does it take you to water the plants? And actually, really, every Sunday is when I water the plants, about 30 minutes max, I suppose. And we'll talk about watering because, the big challenge with houseplants actually is that the symptoms for a sick houseplant are so ambiguous. If a plant has too much water, it can go brown around the edges, the leaves can go brown. But if it's not got enough water, exactly the same thing happens. A plant can die if it's not got enough water, it can die if it's got too much water. So it's a constant kind of mystery as to what they need. But here's the thing. The reality is that almost all houseplants are a type of exotic plant. That's why they thrive in our houses, because there's a fairly nice even temperature. It's generally on the warmer side in people's houses. And so if you think that actually you treat them as an exotic plant, I think that helps in terms of knowing what they need. All plants, therefore, really need misting twice a week. I have a little spray bottle and I just go around and gently mist them. You don't have to do it elaborately so you end up with mold all over the walls. You can do it quite close and it can just be little bits. It doesn't have to be like you see them doing at Kew or something with great big misters all over the place. You're not creating a rainforest, but just little bits is great. And then in terms of watering, I water them, and this is a little bit more of a complicated question, but I'll make the answer hopefully as simple as possible. I water them, each plant once a week for what I call a 4-pour. So in bar pouring terms, if you were to free pour spirits, so if you're making a cocktail or something, you can count to 2, 1 and 2, and that's about 25 ml. And if you count to 4, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, that's about 50 ml. So I guess I'm watering my plants on average about between 50 and 100 ml of water once a week. The bigger ones obviously a bit more, but it's not like it's half a watering can. The watering can I use is this one here. It's a really gorgeous Hirst watering can. I've played with cheap watering cans and they always end up breaking or dribbling or whatever, and this is this really cute, they've all got different names, I forget what this one's called. It's just it's an indoor plant watering can from Hirst. This will last probably the rest of my life, so a bit pricier, I forget how much, maybe £30 I think, something like that, but it's made of metal or brass actually I think, and it's got a little rose that goes on the top as well. I never use the rose, so that's great because I can just fill that up wherever. So the bigger plants, absolutely give them a little bit more. I always saucer feed the plants as well because that helps them regulate how much water to take up. If you pour stuff in the top of the plants, and I do for some of them, and I'll explain, I've recorded a short film, I'll show that in a second. Some of the plants, but very few, I top feed and top water. But if they're in a saucer, they can self-regulate how much they need, so they don't get flooded, which prevents rot and therefore helps them regulate the leaves. Now, one of the questions that Jim and actually Kelly asked is about microclimates, and I'll come to that in a second. So in the summer, I tend to switch to twice weekly watering because it's so warm. However, if in the winter you've got your heating on a lot, central heating's so dry that you really need to mist. Like you need to be spraying the plants, once a day isn't too much, but lots of people don't want to do that. Of course, I think about misting my plants once a day, and that's quite a lot. That's quite a big deal because I've got so many. But if you've just got 4 or 5 plants in your house, that should be easy. Just do it while you're having your cup of tea in the morning or something, just a quick mist. Or as you walk past, the plant, just give it a quick mist. And then I move to twice weekly watering because it's so dry and so warm that they're using up that water, but also there's an element of evaporation as well, because if the water's sat in the dishes, there's a radiator right behind these plants here, which is great, but it means at this particular corner I always have to keep a bit more of an eye on. So if I'm ever in the kitchen, I just sort of have a little look, see if there's any water in the peace lily, because while peace lilies are quite demanding with water, they're super resilient as well. And just keep a little eye out for stuff. You know, if the leaves start drooping, think, oh, okay, it needs more water. That plant's more thirsty. I'll just maybe do that twice a week or double the amount of water I put in. So it fundamentally is really easy to keep as many houseplants as you want. I think people overcomplicate it. The big challenge, and I think this is the complicated bit, is positioning them. Because actually, plants need a certain amount of light, certain conditions, certain draft, or some of them don't like draft, and it's so imperceptible that we wouldn't necessarily even know. So I've got some plants, for example, that, you know, you'll buy a plant for a room, you think, oh, that'll, you know, that plant will look great there next to the bed, or the leaves are the right colour for this room, or they match this or whatever. So you buy the plant, you put it in the place, and then the plant starts to die back. It loses its leaves, or it goes brown, or it droops. And it clearly doesn't like it there. So take your pointers from the plants. If at any point it starts to look like it's not happy, it's not happy. It's not going to get happier. It's not like a child where you go, well, you're going to have to sit it out and like it or lump it. So, hey, Sarah, good morning. We're talking houseplants. So move it to a different room. But think about the room that you're moving it to. So if the room that you're moving it from clearly doesn't like it there, see if you can find a room that is lighter or less light, or warmer or less warm, or if that's north facing, move it to a south facing. So there are plants in this room, in this sort of kitchen diner, that I didn't really want here. I wanted in other rooms, but it was the other side of the house is north facing. They just weren't doing very well, so I moved them here. The triangularis plant, which I'll show you in a second, just did not do very well in another room at all. In fact, it died back to nothing. It was literally nothing for ages, and I almost gave up on it. And then I saw a little rescue shoot saying, please, please move us. And it's all come to life now since I've moved it. So anyway, my point being, sort of broadly, it's a lot easier than you think. Jim's asked, you know, do I have a preference with regards to tap water or rainwater? The reality is actually that we have very hard water here, so hard I need to get a softener fitted really, and I just use it from the tap. Rainwater is always a preference because it's got gorgeous nutrients, but the reality is that you can feed your plants, so every couple of months, I suppose I do it. I'm a bit lazy. You know, the professional advice would be, you know, kind of every 6 to 8 weeks, a little bit of sort of week feed. Feed them more, obviously, in the growing season, sort of springtime when it's lighter, because you will find that even your house plants, even though they're tropical and they're being kept in this lovely ambient atmosphere all year round, they will be less active during the winter because it gets colder and also a lot darker. So they will, you know, not grow as quickly. And then suddenly in the spring, you'll see them just, you know, come to life again. So I actually use tap water, absolutely fine. Softened water is really dangerous for plants because they get so much build-up very quickly of salt deposits. So if you've got soft water in your house, I'd probably stick to, you know, leaving the water can overnight. That will be fill up, you know, overnight. Or I don't know, maybe bottled water. It gets a bit expensive, doesn't it? Find a tap that's not got soft in it or something. Anyway, so that's that. Now, I'm going to talk about microclimates in a second, but just to sort of give you a break, because I've been talking quite a lot already, and it's one of those advice ones, I thought I'd show you around some of the houseplants. So I walked around this morning just very quickly to show you some of the plants that I've got in different rooms and where they are, and some of my favourites. And I think you'll find there's a bit of a pattern. So over to you, Jez. So these are just some of my favourite things, as the saying goes. This is an absolutely gorgeous and epic peace lily, which I'll talk about in a second. They're happy pretty much anywhere, and the bigger they get, when they get nice and established like this, you can kind of overwater them, you can underwater them, they're pretty resilient. There are a number of different palms. Another smaller peace lily here is looking less looking less. Woody, would you like to explain to everybody at home, Woody, why the peace lily doesn't look very good? Because apparently it tastes nice, doesn't it? Yeah. There's a ficus here. These are sort of pretty staple plants, I think, really, for house plants. It is right next to a radiator, and so you have to manage that a little bit, which I'll talk about in a second. This Victorian fern is looking absolutely gorgeous. And I put it on top of this old cabinet. It's an old baker's cabinet, actually. That's where they would have stored and proved bred in there. And then here we've got this beautiful Alocasia zebrina. The zebrina ones are the ones with the sort of zebra pattern down the stems like this. Again, there's a Calathea at the back there. I really love Calathea because I love the contrast. It's amazing purple back, and then loads of different designs and patterns on this side. I've got lots of different ones. This also a Calathea, so you see it's a lot plainer on this side, still with that lovely pattern there. This is the same as the other one, but larger. This is my just favourite plant of all time. This absolutely, I mean, massive leaves. This happens a lot with house plants, where sometimes the ends of the leaves, because of when they were growing, either a rapid change in temperature or maybe mealybug or something else damages the end of the leaf, and so you get this sort of wrinkling like this. But this is a bird of paradise. They flower very rarely. I think it's once every sort of few years, but they grow quite slowly as well. And then cheese plant, classic, lovely big cheese plant, and that's huge, doing its thing over there as well. So that's here. They're all grouped together. I'll explain why in a second when I hand back to Jez. But there they are. Let's have a little look at the other side. Is a philodendron. I'm really, really obsessed with philodendron. They make amazing indoor plants, and they come in so many different varieties. So I'm growing this one, I'm training it up the wall. There is enough actually for the tendrils to come across here towards this mirror, but I haven't done it yet. Yet another Calathea, completely different on this side. Lovely, this lovely deep purple on that side. This one's been attacked by woody, which is why it looks like that. Another ficus here. They make just great statement pieces to fill gaps. Another Alocasia, this one completely different. So you can see that the stems aren't stripy. This isn't a zebrina variety. Another philodendron. I mean, look at that. Really, really lovely. Different kind of, this one's like an arrow shaped leaf, sometimes called the arrow plant. I've trained it across this little stick here hanging from the ceiling, which also facilitates these little hanging pots here as well. Fern, again, just like I'm going to explain in a second with the other ones, you need to work out where the ferns like being. You can see this one is growing and shooting off new bits, so obviously very happy there. I've always got issues with these. I absolutely love the, some people call it the shamrock plant, some people call it the butterfly plant. This lovely, I mean, they're just absolutely stunning leaves. And so tucked away in the corner of the kitchen is this little guy. Now this is again, it's a philodendron. It's called Philodendron Hope, and you can see how completely different the leaves are. Ultimately, it's still an arrow-shaped leaf. It's just that it's very patchy. Now, what tends to happen is this dies back, which is what's happened here. These huge leaves were all part of the plant. They're absolutely huge. It was all here, and they all die back, and then they all come back again. So you can see there's lots of new shoots in there. A little bit slow, but if you're patient with it, you know, it did fill this whole gap up here. And again, this, another philodendron, but this gorgeous lime green variety, slightly less traily, although they do have a tendency to trail. If you don't want them to trail, you can just find the bit that you don't want anymore, cut it back just below that new growth there. You can just see that this is how you can tell if it's a philodendron, because you get these little nodes here, and you'll cut it just beyond the node, and then you can take the bit you take off, put it in some water, and it will shoot and grow more. Pop this little table here in the hall. This is an old butcher's block that I found and chucked a ton of plants on it. This changes all the time. There's, you know, repeated patterns, lovely Calathea, there's a smaller peace lily, again, just the same plants again and again, but with different patterns. That's what I quite like to do. Again, same plant, different pattern. And then of course this is the famous plant wall that's a little scrappy at the minute because obviously I've had other things to do in the house, but essentially each one of these test tubes contains clippings, and the idea is that when you come to the house, if you're invited to the house, you bring a plant clipping from home. We put the plant clipping in here so that it can root, like these do. See that? There's the roots. And then you can take one back with you, so it's like a plant exchange. This is a classic example of how you can take a little philodendron clipping like that, pop it in some water, it roots brilliantly well into the roots of it, then you can plant that on and create more free plants. I popped some dried ones in there as well. There's always some orchids about. I love orchids. I like to find sort of slightly unusual ones. You can leave orchids. When the roots come out like this, they have air roots. Don't cut these off. Lots of people cut these off. You shouldn't ever cut these off because these are the roots. You can repot them if you want to. And whenever you get a sort of dead stem, just cut that right back close to the original plant, and that will stimulate new growth, and then you get rapid flowering plants all year round. The thing with orchids you have to remember is they're tropical, so they need somewhere warm and light. So on top of radiators is quite a nice place. And check out this guy, isn't this absolutely stunning? Again, it is technically a philodendron, I believe, although I do need to check that actually, because it was a sort of scrappy plant in a sale, and I thought I was going to lose it, but it's looking really good there. He is on my desk, and he is a Maranta, and isn't this just stunning? Absolutely gorgeous, and he quite likes it in here. We've got lots of nice new growth. I'll talk about how you know plants are happy in a second, but this is another one of my absolute favourites. He's going to trail around, and because he's on my desk he'll need to be contained a little bit, so what I'm going to do is create some little cuttings just at these growth nodes here, pop that in the plant cutting area, the little test tubes, and then I'll get a new free plant. Lovely. So there you go. I hope that is useful. Those are just some of my favourites. There are others, but I realised that already the film was going on like way too long, and I thought, God, I've got other stuff to do. So very quickly on microclimates. Given that most indoor plants are from the Asias or the tropics, they tend to all sort of be very similar. It's not exclusive, of course. So I tend to group things nice and tightly together that go together. So there's not, I mean, I could list a ton of different plant names, but it is quite variable. But here's the deal. A plant on its own will struggle a little more. It will be fine, I'm sure, but it will struggle a little bit more. So it needs to be in the right place. It needs to be in the right temperature. It needs to be watered well. It will be less resilient because it doesn't have a sort of microclimate. Whereas if you bundle loads of plants together like this, nice and tightly, you get little warm air pockets that get trapped between them. They shelter each other from breezes and drafts. And unless, of course, you get mealybug, which I have to say from experience, it doesn't matter how far apart they are. Mealybug apparently can't fly, but I have no idea how they transfer because they do. I have a persistent mealybug issue, which is, I mean, it's every nursery or plant shop's worst nightmare, because if the mealybug is just on the leaves, then it's easier to get rid of. But actually the reality is that most mealybug starts in the soil, or will, you know, the adults will stay on the soil or the substrates. Like I've got all of the plants here have terracotta balls or shells or something covering the soil to help retain the moisture, stop them drying out. And also decoratively as well, it's quite nice. It's amazing how immediately, if you've got lots of plants and you cover the soil with something a little bit more visually appealing, they just look warmer. They look more, you know, you're not looking at bare brown or black soil all the time. So although the terracotta obviously is brown, it's not mud, you know, it's not soil. So it just looks sort of nicer aesthetically. That's the only danger, is if you get mealybug, it spreads rapidly. However, what I've done is I've chosen plants that are a combination of mealybug hating plants. So mealybug don't, for example, seem to be bothered at all by peace lilies. Couldn't give a hoot about them. They'll sit on fern, but they don't tend to really do anything to it. Same with ficus. It doesn't seem to damage the ficus too much. Alocasia they really love, all over it. I can't quite see what damage they've done, so maybe they don't. But there are plants that they absolutely decimate. So, you know, I've only got one or two of those and they're separate from each other. Carol says, what compost do you use for most of your plants, excluding orchids? Just a general purpose compost. I don't, and again, there's loads of advice about that, you know, and maybe my plants would look even better. You have to remember, of course, that you're looking at plants that have only really been in situ for about 5 months. So they're only just beginning really to settle, because back at the farm, pretty much none of them had any brown parts and scrappy leaves and whatever, whereas some of them have been beaten up by woody. Philodendron, by the way, seems to be, mealybug don't seem to bother it, thank goodness, because I've got a lot of philodendron. They tend to be the nicer looking plants. But In fact, that's my go-to. People say, what sort of plant should I take or should I get for home? And philodendron comes in so many different varieties. There's one on top of the fridge over there that actually doesn't seem to trail. It goes up, and it's got these beautiful heart-shaped leaves. And it's a sort of mid-green, I suppose. You can get really, really dark philodendron, fluffy philodendron. But yeah, maybe the plants would look healthier if they were in a special indoor plant compost, but I don't. I use seaweed feed just to feed them every kind of 6 to 8 weeks, something like that, just a little bit. So there you go. I hope that is useful. Feel free, though, if you want to carry on this conversation publicly, let's ask some questions either on Instagram at that Jez Rose, or here, if you want, we can do another one of these. I think I might do a little one later on with maybe some sort of physical repotting and stuff, and show you some sort of cutting back. This time of the year, though, I wouldn't bother feeding the houseplants. I can have a couple of months because they're going to get less watering anyway, unless you've got loads of central heating that's really hot. I mean, that's an interesting question, isn't it? Because I think most of us are going to be using our heating a lot less and putting on a jumper. So if the house is cooler, then certainly you don't need to be watering anymore. Anyway, look what arrived this week, gang. Look what arrived. I'm so excited. We have, as you know, I am a big lover of candles, right? Particularly True Grace. They have 2 new flavours. Can you call a candle a flavour? Scents, smells. Oh my flipping gosh. This is, it's called Classic Christmas. Hang on, is this Classic Christmas? Yeah. It's like pine. It's like a sweet pine and spices. It is flipping gorgeous. I'm going to pop it in the shop. We've only got a few, but it is amazing. You want to? Oh, I'm so excited about Christmas. And then this one is called Village Christmas, different jar. And it's sweet, it's spicy, it's clovey, it's it's really nice. It's really nice. So those, keep an eye on your email. If you're not signed up to T-Mail, definitely have a look at T-Mail, because I'm going to pop a little discount in there for you as well, so you can have a little look at those. And don't forget your Elevenses discount. If you're watching this, of course, you can use the word Elevenses. You get 11% off of everything in the shop. One last question before I get to my big idea. Kath says she's got a porch which is quite cold, but it's enclosed. Any recommendations? Real shame, because actually I've seen porches in the summer. Why don't you put tons of succulents there? They will adore that because of the glass, and you'll get beautiful display of succulents. And then in the winter you can bring them in. In fact, in the winter you could probably keep them there, providing it doesn't get too cold. But even if it does get too cold, they're unlikely to perish as long as it doesn't get frosty. Or maybe the sorts of plants that are okay with it being colder and damper. So, for example, you could try some ferns in there. You'll know very quickly, because the ferns tell you very, very quickly if they're happy, and the fronds start to go brown. They just dry up. So you can just remove it and they'll recover in time. Ferns take a few days to recover, like maybe kind of week to 10 days, something like that. But I think that's a good idea. Anyway, David says he's on a treadmill. There's more cakes, please. There's no cake this week. There's no cake because we've run out of time. But here is this week's big idea. This week's big idea is this. I wanted to voice my concerns about Qatar, and to say that I fully support the boycotting of the World Cup being in Qatar. It is a very interesting question. Do we tell another country and another culture what to do, and can they tell us what to do? And there is always the cultural phenomenon for us as human beings. What exactly should we do? How do we get on better? And it probably isn't policing other people. However, we do live in 2022, and I would love to think that we have moved on. There are horrific crimes that happen in Qatar. There is an atrocious supporting of human rights broadly. So while I think we do have to be respectful of other people's beliefs, I do also think that we have come a long, long way as a species to get away from the seclusion of minority groups, to get away from the punishment of people, for being women. We have got, just generally as a society, I think we're a bit better than, hoarding people into sort of criminal groups and not letting people have the freedom of speech. Obviously, the LGBTQ plus issues are significant for me and for millions of others as well. However, it doesn't stop there. You know, the slavery and bribery and corruption that happens in Qatar is significant too. And by supporting the FA Cup over there, I do think that we are supporting, therefore, or quietly endorsing what they're doing. Of course, you know, how much money is okay to keep you quiet? If you're being paid £200 million to go over there and be a public figure, could you say no to £200 million? Well, perhaps it would be better to decide not to go and to use your, you know, kind of vote with your feet and give people the option to perhaps listen to your story and your reasons from the safety of your country here. I think it's definitely worth talking about more, but also, as always, everything has to come from kindness, does it not? Otherwise, you have to ask yourself, why are we here? So, have a little think on that this week. I don't know what the answer is, but I do know that I think kindness should always prevail. And if other people are doing things that you fundamentally know are not right, I think you have to lead with your heart and vote with your instinct. And your instinct always should be, you know, bring it back home. Global issues are always a little more challenging, but think about it locally. If you were walking down the street and somebody was abusing somebody else in whatever form, would you say, oh, well, that's okay, you know, I'll carry on having my food here, or I'll carry on shopping, I'll just turn a blind eye? Personally, I'd try to stop it, or I'd certainly feel very uncomfortable and want to remove myself from it. And if you saw other people supporting it and allowing it to happen, I certainly would feel less about those people. This isn't anything to do about religion. It absolutely is to do with being a better human. So have a little think on that. It has been wonderful, gang. This has gone so quickly. I can't believe when you ask me to do specialist topics like this, it just goes so quickly. So listen, thanks so much for joining me. Happy bloody Sunday. It's miserable outside. I don't feel very well. I'm going to probably snuggle up, although I have a 17-week-old puppy who has other plans. So happy nearly Christmas. I'm so excited. You're going to have this every single week until Christmas. Have a wonderful week. And here's my final thought of today, and I suppose it is this. If we get a choice to do something right or something we know is wrong, which is the better choice to make? Now, that's a loaded question. If, of course, you say, well, it has to, of course, be, does it not, the thing that is right? What if the thing that we choose actually has consequences on somebody else? Does that still make it right, or does that still make it wrong? Love you all very much. See you next week. Have a great week. Happy Sunday. Bye-bye. Hey, happy Sunday. Nothing like a hot cup of tea